Over the years, the partnership between Australia and India in the field of education has remained strong, with a particular emphasis on providing Indian students access to Australia's high-quality education. Now, the Australian Education Indian Potential Partnership for Global Success has been highlighting the extensive implications and benefits of the strategic alliance between our two great nations. It has been focusing on various stakeholders, including individuals, corporations, global impacts, the Indo-Pacific region's geopolitical landscape, and alignment with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Now, in our continued partnership with Austrade, we showcase an appreciation of Australian education capabilities with an aim to enhance literacy, academic rigor, and world-class research in India at scale, and focus on its impact on the Indian economy. Hello and welcome to the Australian Government and Study Australia present Australian Edge for India's Century in partnership with Times Network, a series of dialogues through which we bring to you a strong narrative on Australia as a high-quality study destination. And for our first episode, we're focusing on Australia-India relationship and its impact on stakeholders. And for the first part of the conversation, I'm joined by Sarah Storey. She's the Deputy High Commissioner, Australian High Commission, New Delhi. We have Mr. Peter Verghese, he's the Chancellor with the University of Queensland, and Mr. Samir Saran, the President of the Observer Research Foundation. Sirs, ma'am, thank you so much for joining me here today. Sarah, let's kick off with you. How has the strategic partnership between Australia and India progressed in 2023, and what are the key areas that have seen notable progress?
Thank you, Sumit. It's a pleasure to be here today, and it's almost a question of where exactly to start. Australia-India relations are really at a high point. We have elevated our relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership. What does that mean, say your viewers? Well, what it means is that with Japan, we are just one of two of India's partners that has a free trade agreement, and we have an annual summit. We also have every 2 years our defence and foreign ministers speak together. In practice, this means that across all phases of our endeavours, we are working constantly to expand and deepen our natural partnership with India. It really is a natural partnership because our economies are complementary as they are growing together. We each have what the other economy needs, and there is so much scope for growth as we seek to diversify our economies and make the Indo-Pacific stronger.
Absolutely, and this partnership has been long going. It's fruitful for a long time, and I'm sure there's a lot more that we can expect from this. Coming to you, Samir, what opportunities will the growing collaboration between Australia and India offer to educational institutions, businesses, and governments?
So, let's put it in a different context. What are India's big three drivers shaping its future? Clearly, two of them are to do with the field of education, science, and innovation. We will have this very large young cohort hungry for knowledge. We have young Indians who seek that knowledge, and we have a diverse landscape of skills and opportunities that exist. And clearly, Australia over the years has emerged as one of those centers that caters to many of these. In fact, has the capabilities to respond to this Indian hunger of knowledge, of education, of skills. But we need to start thinking big. We need to start onshoring Australian universities into the Indian mainland, where a much larger cohort is able to avail of these opportunities. I can see some positive signs. One of them already establishing a campus in India soon, and a few others following suit. And I think that's the beginning. We have to expand this education partnership and by a multiple of X. Now, that's one part of it. But I think equally important is the second revolution India is undergoing, and this is around innovation and technology. India's future will be digital. India's future will be designed and shaped by emerging technologies. Some of those India is a leader in, others Australia has a great significance in, for example, quantum, for example, cybersecurity. And again, these present great opportunity for university collaborations on creating networks of experts. So increasingly, India and Australia are going to become two poles of the future technology landscape, innovation landscape. And again, the educational institutions and their research arms become critical to this transformation.
Sarah, just coming to you with my next question, how will the manifold advantages of this unprecedented era in Australia-India relations, how will it translate into tangible benefits for both countries' economies?
That's a great question, Sumit. The thing I mentioned before that we have concluded an interim free trade agreement, ECTA, and we are currently in negotiation for a comprehensive agreement that we're hoping to continue work on. But the initial one is very comprehensive in itself. It actually already, as it came into force at the end of December in 2022, already 96% of Indian goods are able to enter Australia tariff-free, and 85% of Australian goods now enter Indian tax-free. And so we are looking to transition those down further. These policies and incentivization are just enabling that trade to deepen. What we are hoping will happen is that now Indian consumers will benefit very much from those lower prices, but so too will Indian manufacturers as they look to source more cheaply Australian imports to pursue the Make in India manufacturing base initiative. We think that this will be great. That's just one example.
Coming to you, Sameer, in what specific ways will the collaborative initiatives expect to be in the coming months and years? How will they bring about benefits for the students, for the parents, and for educators, both in India and Australia?
India's relationship with Australia has three big elements. One, of course, is people. And I think that is something we need to continue to invest in. The people's bridge that links the two countries needs to be nourished, needs to be strengthened. It needs to compete and perhaps even surpass the people's bridge we have with, for example, the United States of America or UK. And that will be clearly one element that we need to invest into. Now, what does invest into mean? I think beyond education, I think there is culture, there is sports, there is coastal communities, there are urban networks, there are women leadership programs. So that is certainly important. But beyond just this, I think the people-to-people relationships, the soft diplomacy is also what we do together as partners in other locations. And I think India and Australia will truly become linked and joined in their own future imaginations of themselves when we identify our roadmaps to have commonalities that are extraneous to just the bilateral. We have to, the people-to-people is going to expand significantly when both of us become co-owners of people-centered global diplomacy. So, luckily for us, between the two countries, we are close to 1.5 billion people. So we are a large number of folks, and we should leverage this to include people from around the world into our own cultural and soft diplomacy equations.
Peter, moving on, what role do you think soft diplomacy plays in the deepening of the Australia-India ties, and how will it impact this bilateral relationship?
Well, I think it'll play a central role in building this relationship, because ultimately a genuinely comprehensive relationship is not just what two governments do together. I mean, the governments are doing many things together, and that's terrific. But ultimately, you want a relationship which is also a connection between communities. And to get there, I think it's very important that both in India and Australia, we make a large effort to understand each other better than we do now. Look, I think, Sumit, it's fair to say there is a perception deficit on both sides of this relationship. And by that, I mean the perception of India in Australia needs to be updated, needs to be broadened. And I think something similar probably could be said about the perception of Australia and India. And soft power, public diplomacy, I mean, these are all vehicles through which we can do that. So I see the soft power element of this relationship becoming more and more important. And again, you know, I would point to the crucial role that this almost 1 million strong diaspora in Australia, Indian diaspora in Australia, can play. Now, 1 million may not be a large number in India, but it's a very large number in Australia. And I think they will be, in the longer term, a very strong bridge between these two countries. And whatever we build in the area of soft power and public diplomacy will really be essentially drawing out that as an asset for both countries. Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's why it's important for all the stakeholders to, you know, participate. And that's also what we're kind of trying to achieve through this whole series. One final question to you, Sarah. You know, what steps are being taken by both the countries to ensure sustained growth and success of this strategic partnership in the long term?
Well, I think that it's easy from the government down. Foreign Minister Wong has said that she travels a lot. For instance, just last week, she's now travelled to each of the Pacific Island Forum member states, which is quite an achievement. She's been to India, but in the margins of other visits or when her counterpart, Dr. Jaishankar, has visited Australia, she has said that she has had more person-to-person engagement with him than with any other foreign minister. So that commitment is clear. India hosting the G20 is bringing a wealth of Australian ministers to India this year. But the government is also institutionalising the greater engagements, whether it be through the new Centre for Australia-India Relations in Australia that will be open later this year, whether it be Australian boards companies bringing their entire board to India, as we're seeing shortly with the Australia-New Zealand Banking Group. We are also seeing Australian education institutions, for instance, taking advantage of India's reform policies. We have 2 Australian education institutions now approved to set up a campus in Gift City in Gujarat, which is just remarkable. So that's Deakin and the University of Wollongong. Others, such as Peters, have very well-established PhD joint research programs across the very many excellent education institutions. So I could go on for half an hour there, but I won't. That's just a few examples.
Well, that's been very interesting, and thank you for sharing all of those examples with us, Sarah. But it's time for a short break on the episode. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Samir, for joining me on this part of the conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a short break here on Australian Government and Study Australia present Australian Edge for India's Century in partnership with Times Network. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to Australian Government and Study Australia present Australian Edge for India's Century in partnership with Times Network. My discussion continues, and in this segment, we're discussing how policy developments will impact stakeholders and highlight different interests at play. And we have with us 3 experts. Allow me to introduce them. First up, we have Professor Peter Hoy. He's the Vice Chancellor and President at the University of Adelaide. We have Matthew Johnston. He's the Minister, Counsellor, Education and Research for South Asia with the Australian High Commission in New Delhi. And with me in studio, we have Monica Kennedy, Dr. Monica Kennedy. She's Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner, Australian Trade and Investment Commission. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you, Monica, for joining me here today. Peter, if I could start off with you. You know, How do you think this international partnership between Australia and India, how do you think it'll impact different stakeholders, including individuals, businesses, and governments?
I think it's a huge opportunity for Indian students to avail themselves of Australian education and perhaps actually come to our country to get educated, but being recognised for the knowledge they always bring rather than having to start all over again. So I think that's a massive opportunity for Indian institutions. Likewise, we recognise that India has an incredible intellectual capacity. I think it will be a great opportunity for Australian students to go and further educate themselves in India. So that's at the educational level. And we see the benefits of it. We have 4% of our 25,000 students at my university, so about 1,000 students are from India. We get cultural exchange, we see it in food, we see it in sport, but then we also have an opportunity to synergize between India's natural advantages and ours. And one of the things that I really think will be important is the energy transition and the opportunity for Australia and India to actually develop our economies to benefit all, but with a lower carbon footprint. And that's something we can talk more about as we go forward.
Very important point there, Professor, because the energy discussion is taking a whole lot of importance nowadays. Yes, we will be talking a bit more about that. But Monica, I just want to bring you in on the same question. What are your thoughts?
There's lots of opportunities for our educational institutions to work together and to collaborate on research outcomes, of course, but also for our students to be working together on complex projects and to be learning from for our nations to be learning from each other about how we develop in this area and in the other SDGs as well. For individuals in particular, I really like to think about the Indian diaspora in Australia particularly, very strong, very vibrant group, very successful group of people who are working in business and working in government. And the links between our nations are always solidly linked to the experiences and relationships between our individuals. So while our governments come together in all of these new projects, and we're seeing opportunities in everything from collaboration in branch campuses, so foreign branch campuses here in India, right through to research collaborations, the likes that we see with IIT Delhi and UQ, or with IIT Bombay and Monash University, for example. The opportunities are immense and across such a broad spectrum.
And I think that's what's really interesting and important to see, that there are so many of these partnerships, these collaborations, and I'm sure the way ahead there'll be more and more, which just kind of enriches everyone. Matthew, I'd like to bring you in on this conversation. If we look at things from a global perspective, just wanting to get your thoughts on what some of the implications that this growing relationship between Australia and India would have for other countries and regions.
Yes, look, thank you very much, Sumit, for that question. It's a really good one, and it does flow on very much on what my colleagues have just been speaking about with you. We really recognise the opportunity for partnering with India for the broader global good. And a really good example of this has been the really close relationship our education ministers have developed between each other. So Dharmendra Pradhan here in India and Minister Jason Clare in Australia, they've met now on at least 3 occasions, 2 in person. They really encapsulate this opportunity as educating people for the world. And if you think about how many graduates of higher education are going to come from India in coming years, it's going to be the highest. So that opportunity between Australia's institutions and India's really will have a great impact on countries in our region. Our ministers have really set this as a goal for our governments. They really have set for all our education institutions and for all of us this goal of Australia and India as suppliers of education and research for the globe, tackling global problems and global issues. We have formal government-to-government mechanisms to do that as well. Our ministers meet regularly. Australia and India are unique in that we are the only education ministerial forum between the two countries. So, you know, in education, that is. So India doesn't have that with other countries. So it really shows that really close relationship between us. And if you think about Australian universities that are really internationalized and experts in partnering globally, it's a really rich opportunity for both countries.
Peter, my next question to you is just your thoughts on how the geopolitical landscape of the Indo-Pacific region looks like now, and your thoughts on some of the opportunities that could be coming out from that.
I think we are at a time where we have to be really careful to look to joint advantage rather than picking winners and losers. Because if you play as part of a team, then I think we'll get greater wealth distribution, greater wealth growth. So the opportunity for the region is to see one of the world's largest economies, the largest population in India, being a real powerhouse for how the Indo-Pacific region actually can become even more affluent and distributing wealth more equally. That to me is the big opportunity that we have, and we would love to partner with India in achieving that ambition.
Monica, I just wanted to bring you in. You know, as any relationship progresses, the benefits are manifold, but it's important that these benefits are, you could say, transferred to all stakeholders. It shouldn't be that it's just one group that is getting the most out of it. So just your thoughts about some of the measures that are being put into place so that the benefits are distributed, and especially to those stakeholders who might be, who might historically have been marginalized. How do we ensure that?
Yeah, thank you for that. And the Australia-India Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement is doing fabulous things to reduce prices from a trade point of view, so that Australia and India can have their products more accessible to each market. But aside from that, and I think probably more importantly for us in this education conversation, is a couple of things. I think the first is with the growing trust in education between Australia and India, and the recognition of the similarities between our systems, the trust we have in the outcomes in our education systems, has led to opportunities for branch campuses to be established. And we heard earlier that both Deakin University and University of Wollongong will set up branch campuses in Gift City. We are hoping with the guidelines for foreign campus establishment, as those guidelines are finalised, that there'll be opportunity for foreign campuses to be established here in India. This means that Australian institutions can offer the great quality educational experience of an Australian degree here in India, make it more accessible from a cost point of view, from a mobility point of view. But also our institutions being close together means that we're sharing knowledge, we're developing curriculum, we're developing systems for excellence and quality and safety for students. We're doing those together, and that's enabling access for vast numbers of people to have an exceptionally high quality educational experience here.
Well, we're just about out of time, but one last question to Matthew. How do you think this partnership will help align with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, and what role can it play, in fact, in advancing those goals?
So this partnership between both countries is operating across all subject matters, whether that be energy, agriculture, education, all areas are in the mix for this strengthening relationship. So absolutely the work that we do, particularly through education, through strengthening research cooperation and opportunities for dual delivery of education and upskilling, as Monica said, will absolutely tick all those boxes for advancing the SDGs. But one thing that I would sort of highlight, and why it's natural that Australia and India come together, particularly in higher education, is that 4 of our universities out of 94 that have been assessed by the Times Higher Education Impact Rating are in the top for compliance with and implementation of the SDGs. Many of those 4 Australian universities have active and deep partnerships here in India across all the sectors that we've talked about during this segment. So I think you can really see that these opportunities for partnership and for delivery in India and with India and together globally really are going to make quite a big difference in advancing the SDGs more broadly. And, you know, that internationalization that's happening here in India and with Australia as well, I think is critical to that and critical to making this partnership sustainable over the long term.
And that is what is one of the most important points to make this sustainable in the long term. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Monica, for joining me. This has been a very interesting and important conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all on this episode of Australian Government and Study Australia present Australian Edge for India's Century in partnership with Times Network. But we have many more episodes lined up, so stay tuned to the channel for the next episode. Thank you so much for watching.